Hi, I'm that Slavic writer guy, and today we're going to be talking about Don Carlo, Verdi's longest opera. Clocking in at about 4 hours of music, this puppy approaches practically Wagner length, full of crazy excuses for singing about forbidden love. I'm going to do what's best for you because I'm your friend kind of friendship, noble ideals, assassination crushed by ruthless oppression, and conniving court vanity, all of which was bullshit out of real Spanish history. To find out how the life of one crazy Spanish crown prince became 5 acts and 4 hours of singing with ballet, grab a whoop. Don Carlo was first performed under the French title Don Carlo, which is Don Carlo with a silent S on the end because it's in French, at the Paris Opera in 1887 in its 5-act plus ballet entirety. Verdi was already making cuts here and there over concerns that the opera would be too long and not end before Parisian public transport stopped running for the night. Next thing to know about it is that it was quickly translated into Italian, not only because people wanted to clearly start performing it in Italy, but also because this was just the tradition at the time in the 1880s that when people did opera, it was performed in Italian. And even in France, under some smaller companies, just were wanting the Italian script. So it was translated and then came to be under the title we know today, which is Don Carlo, no S. There were further productions in Italy over the next 15 years, during which Verdi was quickly keen to drop the ballet from the third act. Most of the reason why it was originally in was because it was commissioned by Paris Opera, and the French School of Opera had a lot more rules and minutes that went into what comprised a grande opera than did the Italians. So, for example, the French would say in Act 2, in the second part, there has to be a duet between the tenor and the soprano, and there must be a ballet in the middle of Act 3. And the Italians didn't really have all of these kinds of forms. So that was the first thing that was quick to go. And while Verdi kept making some cuts and additions here and there, it mostly still remained about 4 hours long. And even though, especially in some early performances that weren't sanctioned by Verdi and which actually angered him quite a lot when he heard about them, there were others that just omitted the first act entirely, which Verdi dug his heels on like a stubborn donkey in about until 15 years after the opera's debut. And during the 1880s, finally went, gee, I've had this wonderful idea. We should cut Act 1. Aren't I such an insightful, innovative new maestro? Well, no, he'd had people whispering that in his ear and being shouted down for the first 15 years since the debut performance of the opera. So this resulted in what we know today as Don Carlo and what you are most likely to see when you go to the opera. The first one is the so-called Milan version, which is 4 acts with no ballet, and then the Modena version, which keeps Act 1 in some form, according to Verdi's original vision, which he later backtracked on, and then does the rest of the Milan version. So, to wrap that up a bit, when you're heading to see a production of Don Carlo, it's important to remember that not only is this Verdi's longest opera, but that also it is, of all of Verdi's operas, the ones that he made the most official revisions to. But it's all going to look somewhat like this. Let's get started with our cast of characters. We've got Don Carlo, the Crown Prince of Spain, main tenor and hero of our opera, who is hopelessly in love with his fiancée, Elizabeth de Valois, daughter of the King of France and our main soprano diva. Then there's the Princess of Eboli, a mezzo-soprano, one of the members of the Spanish court, and a totally conniving bitch. Then there's Rodrigo, the Marquis of Posa, baritone, and Don Carlo's best bosom pal. He's also a totally fictional character, unlike the rest of the characters who have some equivalent in actual Spanish history. Rodrigo, Marquis of Posa, nope, totally fictional. Verdi just made the guy up. Our main douchebag, King Philip II of Spain, Don Carlo's father, and a totally tyrannical asshole. Finally, we got the Grand Inquisitor, also a base, the head of the Auto de Fe, and no matter how much of a geezer he may be, the one in Spain who has the power to screw everyone over, including the king. So he's really kind of on the king's side. And since we're talking about death, the grave, and suffering, and this is opera seria, let's get right into it. Act 1, or not. The original Paris version of the opera starts with a bunch of French peasants whining, bitching, and melodiously kvetching about how hard their life is, especially because of the ongoing war between France and Spain. Elizabeth shows up and reassures them that because of her marriage to Carlo, things are going to get a whole lot better, because her marriage with Carlo is going to seal the peace. Carlo himself shows up and falls in love with her at first sight. He pretends to be a member of one of the other noble delegations heading with her to Spain to seal the marriage, but this only lasts as long as it takes for her to ask about her husband-to-be, at which point Don Carlo fesses up and tells her that, hey, it's me, baby, and I am totally in love with you. And she's like, wow, I'm really smitten too. Let's do this. But then their happiness of finding true love at first sight as part of an arranged marriage only lasts as long as it takes for a servant to show up and say that, wait, stop, hold your horses. King Philip II, Don Carlo's dad, is gonna marry Elizabeth instead of you, sonny. So, yeah, this basically means what it means, that Daddy has swooped in and stole Don Carlo's girlfriend away from him, and he's now told to call her mommy. So Elizabeth and Carlo are like, oh, snap. And Act 1. Wait a minute. That's the end of Act 1 after all of these peasants complaining that Don Carlo can't marry his girlfriend because it was stolen away by his dad. I mean, how would you like it? Gee, Verdi sort of buried the lead there. Let's move on to Act 2, which you're most likely to see, and starts after the news has been dropped, and Elizabeth and Carlo are understandably none too happy. We are now at the grave of Emperor King Charles V, Carlo's granddad, and there are a bunch of monks. They're praying when Carlos enters and is like, wow, life totally sucks because dad married the love of my life and now she's my mommy too. And one of the monks goes, well, hey, yeah, that's rough, buddy, but don't worry, things might get a whole lot better once you die and go to heaven. Helps, right? And Carlos is like, no, yeah, you're not helping. But wait, don't you look a lot like my granddad? And if you're watching the opera and there's a ghost pronouncing that things might be better when you die, then is when you know that you're about to start the whole train wreck in slow motion. After Carlos's moment with the monk, Rodrigo, the Marquis of Posa, shows up and sees his best friend and he's like, wow man, how's it going? And he's like, yeah, not too hot because being in love with my stepmom is kind of a bitch. And Rodrigo is like, wow, that must suck, and I can't believe your father would do that. But here, I've come from Flanders where the people are suffering a lot under your dad's tyrannical rule, so I've got just the cure for you. Go to Flanders and try to free them from your dad's oppression. And after that, you'll have forgotten all about Elizabeth. And Carlos like, wow, bro, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that. And the two swear to have each other's backs no matter what happens in a bond of eternal friendship, which is one of the few rare instances in all of opera where a baritone and a tenor sing a duet about their undying friendship, and the baritone does not immediately turn into a totally two-faced asshole in the following act. But I forgive it, Why? Because it sounds like this. Have a listen. This duet is the most famous thing in Don Carlo, and if you go to a Gallo performance, it is the thing from this opera that's most likely to be performed. Fun fact. So then the king and Elizabeth enter, and Carlos is like, gee, loving your stepmom is still a wrench. Act 2, Scene 2. Princess Eboli, misconniving bitch, is singing a song about basically nothing, but I guess is supposed to foreshadow her being mistaken for someone else later on in the opera. Elizabeth shows up, followed by Rodrigo, who says that he just got this letter from France that also has a secret letter in it saying that Carlo wants to meet with her in private. But because Elizabeth is already taken as the queen, Eboli somehow assumes that this must mean that Don Carlo has moved on from his first love, Elizabeth, and now loves her instead. For whatever reason she does assume that, I'm actually not quite too clear on, but she just does. That's opera sense for you, baby. Elizabeth and Carlo then meet together, and instead of it turning into a big, hot, heavy, yama yama, we both love each other in this sex romance scene, that's not where this is going. Because Carlo is just, again, like, having to stick around here, pining for you all the time, really kind of sucks. So please get on the king's ear and tell him to send me to Flanders where I can agitate him. She's like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever, I'll do it. And then Carlos suddenly gets all really confused and is like, no, because you must still love me, and if you really love me, you'd be like, no, please stay. And she's like, but I got my duty, and you have your duty, and we kind of go on to this, so I may as well send you to Flanders. And then he's like, no, I love you, and you should love me, but I also want to go to Flanders, and just kind of really storms out in a tizzy. King Philip then walks in and gets all bent out of shape because Elizabeth, his queen, has been left alone. He takes it out on one of Elizabeth's servants by banishing her, to which Elizabeth sings a really sad fair love song to her in a melodious, lovely excuse for more singing. That business with banishing a servant girl, as one does done, the king then meets with Posa and is like, Posa, you really are a young go-getter and a whippersnapper, so I'd like you to come work for me. And Posa's like, well, yeah, but, you really need to know about what's going on in Flanders, and I really think you should free them from your oppression. And the king is like, well, yeah, no, not happening. And if you try anything, the Grand Inquisitor can bring everyone down, is watching you, so don't. But other than that, I think you're generally a cool guy. The king then goes on telling him about, well, Carlos was meeting with my wife again, and I think they're really having an affair. And Rodrigo's like, no, don't worry about it. That's not happening. But, if you're really worried about that, I could volunteer to act as chaperone and make sure no funny business is going on. And the king is like, yeah, that's the right idea. You go do that. Act 3. Queen Elizabeth is throwing a masquerade garden party that she apparently doesn't even want to go to because she exchanges her mask with Princess Eboli's so she doesn't have to go, and Eboli will look more or less like her. At midnight, Don Carlos enters the gardens at the party, having received a letter from this girl who wants to have a little tryst with him. And seeing this girl in the mask, also in the gardens alone, he goes up to her, going like, hey, Elizabeth, wow, glad you wanted to meet me here, and I'm still so in love with you, and, we should really be together. And then the mask gets taken down, and snap, it's Eboli, who gets really jealous, and is like, I knew it, you still love the queen, and you two are still having an affair, and unless you love me instead of the queen, I am going to tattle on you. And before you tell me to piss off, I am a really formidable opponent that could do stuff against you if you don't. Rodrigo then shows up and interposes himself and is like, actually, no, wait, really piss off, woman, because I'm in good with the king. And this just makes Eboli even more pissed, and she goes, no, seriously, I really can do stuff against you because I have a secret that is even bigger. And without even wanting to know what it is, Rodrigo whips out a knife and is like, fuck it, yeah, I'm just gonna stab you and solve the problem that way. And then he kind of thinks, that could really go badly for me. So, we'll just let God decide who comes out on top in the end. And Eboli finally pisses off. But seeing that she's a threat, Posa tells Carlo to give him any incriminating correspondence about insurrection against the king, about an affair with Elizabeth, whatever, and that he'll hold those letters in safekeeping for Carlo. And that's the end of Act 3, Scene 1. A lovely garden party we just had there, isn't it? with Carlos mistaking Elizabeth's identity for someone else just because of a single mask in one of opera's great fallbacks of all time. I am totally not going to recognize it's really you just because your mask or your clothes are slightly changed, and that's totally an effective disguise, even though you're watching it going, yeah, no, how can you not tell? It's really him. Act 3, Scene 2. What a lovely day for an auto da fe. Grand procession, the burning inheritance at the stake, a high mass, and all of that fun stuff. The king shows up and swears to protect his subjects, whether they like it or not. Carlo enters with a bunch of Flemish diplomats. We're like, hey, Philip, what about us? Stop being such an asshole. And the king's like, no dice. Then Carlos draws a sword on him and is like, fuck you, you really are an asshole, daddy. And at first the guards don't know what to do because Carlo is like clearly a member of the royal family, so they don't want to attack him. But then Carlo intervenes because he realizes that his best friend already has totally screwed the pooch by trying to attack the king, and he's really gonna have done it if he goes through with it. So, dumbfounded, Carlos just like wins his sword because he can't believe that his best friend would do something like that to him. The monks prepare the burning stakes as Don Carlo is led off, now arrested, and that spooky monk voice from way back in Act 2 that's now actually Act 1 is heard singing over the entire goings-on, warning once again that life is a bitch until you die and go to heaven. Act 4. So, King Philip II is now all alone in his rooms and has come to the shocking realization just now that the bride he yoinked from Carlos's son doesn't really love him. And of course, deciding that this means he should in fact let the two of them go and be a happy new couple together, he just decides that this means he has to be even more vigilant and controlling over Elizabeth. The Grand Inquisitor, who is by all accounts a completely old, washed up and blind old geezer, pays him a visit. And the king starts going, yeah, you know, Inquisitor, I'm kind of thinking about killing my own son. Do you think that would be sinful or anything? And the Inquisitor's like, well, seeing as, Jesus is God's son, and God directly let him die on the cross, so indirectly God killed his son, that actually, no, that would be a bang-up, upright, and great thing to do to your son. But here's the thing, only if you also agree to kill Rodrigo too, because he's agitating for the Flemish and not being under Spanish Catholic rule, which is totally not cool. And the king's like, wait, no, Posa, he's like a really good guy. I don't want to do that. And then the Inquisitor goes, well, wait a minute, King, because I'm the Inquisitor, and I want that, and even I can bring down you, so that's how it's going to be. And then King Philip's like, wait, yeah, no, let's just forget we even had this whole discussion then. And the Inquisitor walks out being all like, yeah, I'm totally not forgetting about this. Elizabeth walks in wondering where her jewelry safe is, like if someone stole it or something, and the king's like, hey, no one stole it, I took it, and look, I looked through all of your contents, and there is a portrait of Carlos in it. Aha, you must really have been having an affair with him. And Elizabeth is like, no, I'm not. And then she promptly faints right on cue, just like women never do in real life. And the king is like, oh shit, what? I didn't mean for her to faint. And he goes calling for help. And the help that shows up is actually Eboli and Rodrigo. And they come running into the room like, bad king, what have you done? And then the king kind of realizes that he must have been wrong about her having an affair with Carlos. And Rodrigo just kind of goes to the audience and is like, hey, this is really fucked up, and I'm gonna save my friend Carlo no matter what it takes. And then after that, Elizabeth wakes up right on cue and then has some time alone with Eboli. Eboli kind of goes, yeah, I really feel like shit now because I actually was the one who was spreading the whole rumor about you and Carlos having an affair as revenge for Carlos not being in love with me. And the whole reason why I was able to do this is because actually all this while I was the one boinking the king on the side. Eboli then gets told that she either has to become a nun or leave the country. But finally she's left alone going, God, I realize that trying to be a conniving bitch has just ended in this. So as long as I'm on the down and outs now, I may as well try and make amends for it by trying to save Carlos as well. Act 4, Scene 2. Rodrigo visits his best pal, Carlo, in prison. And Rodrigo says, "Don't worry, mate, because I have like made this deal where I take full and total responsibility for all of those incriminating documents about freeing Flanders that you gave me back in Act Three, and so now I'm going to die instead of you. Yay!" And one of the Inquisitor's minions then shows up and pops off Rodrigo just like that. And Rodrigo, of course, this being opera, doesn't like actually die right away, but he spends like 15 minutes lying on the stage, bleeding out and singing about how happy he is to be going to his death, saving his best buddy, and hopes only that Carlo will go on to fight the good fight for the people of Flynn. King Philip then shows up and is like, "Hey, Sonny, I'm going to offer you your freedom now. You know, all that stuff about killing you, yeah, forget about it." But then he actually sees Rodrigo on the floor, actually dead, and is like, "Well, shit, no, I ordered this, but I didn't realize that ordering him dead would actually make him dead." Again, according to opera logic, why he would be surprised by that, I don't know, but it's used for a lot of singing. Elizabeth and Eboli, who apparently is not yet either gone or having become a nun, then show up with a bunch of the King of Spain's subjects hot on their heels, equally pissed off about the death of Posa and the king. And when the king tells them to sit down, shut up, and quiet down, they don't really relent until the Grand Inquisitor shows up and be like, "No, seriously, this is the king, you're supposed to follow the king, and I'm the Inquisitor." And then they all shut up, sit down, and do as they're told. Act 5. We're now back at the tomb of Emperor Charles V, Carlo's granddad. For now, it's just Elizabeth there, and she's praying, finally having resigned herself to just being King Philip's wife, and is totally happy to just see Carlo free, getting ready to go off and handle the situation in Flanders just like his best friend Rodrigo would have always wanted him to. Carlos picks that moment to show up and say a final goodbye to Elizabeth, saying that after all this, he is over his attraction to Elizabeth and now only loves her like a mom. Then, in a great twist of opera logic, which makes absolutely no sense but just for drama, the king and the Inquisitor then show right back up, and seeing the two of them together are like, "Aha! I knew you must still have been having an affair all this while, and Carlo, you're going to die." And so after this like really quick drumhead trial, in which he's like condemned as a heretic, Don Carlo goes to his death, giving his final fuck you to his father, and being like, "You know, Daddy, you're in the wrong, I'm in the right, and, you know, time will see that I am." And kind of like they did with Rodrigo, instead of actually, you know, showing Don Carlo just like being burned at the stake or dying or whatever, he's just led off by the monk and the voice that was in the beginning of the opera, who basically gives the entire moral of the story that, in fact, life's a bitch, and then you die. End of opera. So there you have it. That is 4/5 acts and definitely 4 hours of Verdi. Just doing the synopsis is exhausting. I don't know why I chose Verdi's longest opera for my first opera talk, but it was a great tale of platonic love, unrequited love, honor, and friendship. It is all totally bullshit if you look at real history. In real life, Don Carlo was the Crown Prince of Spain, but he was actually a really sickly guy who was mentally ill and really was mostly a sadist brute, mostly because he was really inbred between all of the royal houses of Europe, and so his genes were bad. He was, in real life, briefly betrothed to Elizabeth at the age of 13. But the marriage was annulled, and King Philip married her instead because there was the peace treaty with Italy apparently necessitated Philip's marriage to Elizabeth in order to seal it. Why and what worth Italy or what all that was about, I don't really know. I am not a historian. This is not a history channel, so look elsewhere for that if you want. The deal with Flanders was a real thing in that the Flemish wanted to detach from Spanish Catholic rule, and the Spanish were not so happy about letting them. But as I said, Rodrigo is a totally fictional character in the opera. He's meant to symbolize the ideal of independence, and the ideal of true friendship in the opera, and also loyalty to the Spanish crown because he was still loyal as a Spaniard. So in real life, what happened was Carlos got increasingly pissed at the king for not giving him any real power because the king obviously was like, you're crazy and a brute and you're not marriage material and you're not fit to lead anything. And so this basically just led Carlos to try and get in bed with the Flemish, and they used him in planned insurrections against the king, or him trying to leave Spain and go to Flanders and install himself as king, in a bunch of really stupid ways, like by informing other courtiers. And then they're like, hey, your son is plotting against you again. And so then the king put all of them down and eventually was just like, you know what? Fuck it. I am locking my son in his rooms for insurrections against me, and also because he's kind of cray-cray. And he stayed locked in his boarded up rooms until he died. So, how did this real history about just a crazy crown prince become this like story of friendship and forbidden love? Well, the Flemish needed some narrative about why the king was an asshole, and so they seized on this as like, because he was betrothed to Elizabeth, he must really have loved her, but then the evil king took him away while he was oppressing us. So therefore, Spanish are evil, and we have grounds for not liking them. So that's how it happened in real life. Verdi seized upon this basically just as an excuse for a lot of drama and a lot of what I have to admit is some really amazing singing. I give it 2 thumbs up. But he even said, this is like his alternate version of events, kind of like I do with my alternative history books. Please, they're on Amazon under Andrew Enzer Clement author. Go buy them. But he, on record, said there is, and I quote, nothing historical in this drama. So he wasn't even trying to stay clear to real history here. So there you have it, the opera Don Carlo, summarized in its entirety by me, that Slavic writer guy. I assume that if you've been listening for this long, you at least somewhat enjoyed it. So hit the like button, hit the dislike button, subscribe to my channel, or don't. I don't give a fuck. I'm me. Na svidaniya. See you again.